Hello there everybody, Rosanna here. How are you doing on this lovely Saturday afternoon? Sorry to be a couple of minutes late. The cosmic monkeys were playing with me and my technology as usual, and it's quite a topic what we're working with today. I'm expecting to be with you for about an hour. Very happy to answer questions as they come about. So just really wanting to give you a little bit of an opportunity to join the session. And hello, Paolo. Welcome, welcome. So what I wanted to talk about today, really, there was a whole title around fertility and conception, but my whole area of expertise as it's evolving now over the last few years has been around working with very complex fertility cases and working with women and their partners who maybe have no known medical reason why they're not getting pregnant, but they're just not getting pregnant. So very often the women that come to me with their partners or on their own will have tried everything before they get to me. And so my woo-woo ways may be a little bit of a challenge for them to kind of work with. But desperation is the mother of all invention. And so the opening of the minds that's necessary, which is what this is all about. It's about understanding why we don't conceive, why we have issues conceiving, and what we need to do to shift ourselves, our biology, our mindset, our emotional state, to be able to welcome the journey of parenthood and to meet the frequency of the souls that want to come to these parents. Now, I call myself an ambassador for the starseed babies that come to this earth on the basis that they are highly sensitive souls that require parents who are wanting to bring children to this world to really up their game and understand that they need to cope with their own ghosts in the nursery. They need to deal with their own unprocessed pain before they're going to be able to bring babies to the world and to be parents to thriving children that are then going to help to be a positive influence in this world. We are perpetuating trauma, cycles of trauma presently that seem to be pushed further down, despite the fact that we know the first 1,001 days of a child's life are just so important. And hello, Craig, welcome, welcome. The whole point with this is that those first 1,001 days actually start from conception, and yet the egg and the sperm that's going to be fertilized at conception will have been programmed to be the egg and the sperm that's going to be fertilized between sort of 2 to 4 months prior. So there's a bit of a time lag with our biology and our environmental communication, if you like. And what's happening is our bodies are doing their best to be able to read the environment that they're coming in, that they are responding to, and therefore to maximize their chances of being able to procreate within this environment. But it is getting harder and harder for this to happen. We are living in a world which Dr. Michel Audin wrote a book called Birth in the Age of Plastics, and I am a doula by virtue of having trained with him and Liliana Lamers. For those of you who don't really know my background, I made my name in pregnancy yoga. I set up Enjoy Yoga in 2004 in Croydon. And I basically set up a yoga business that would take you all the way through from conception through to child yoga, through to teen yoga, through to adult yoga again. So we really, in the 2000 time, hello, welcome everybody who's joining. We really got to market the sort of pregnancy and the baby yoga as our main way of people coming to us, and then they fell in love with yoga by virtue of this. However, I was getting incredibly frustrated working with pregnancy, feeling that the work really needed to have been done before women were getting pregnant, because they were coming to the pregnancy yoga classes with all sorts of unprocessed emotional trauma, psychological trauma, maybe not being as healthy as they could be, and therefore they weren't enjoying their pregnancy as much as they could. And so much of this is preventable. Also, for the women that are pregnant and have conceived through IVF or other assisted fertility methods, they tend to carry their babies in fear a lot of the time, especially if they've had previous miscarriages or there are risk factors that are placing them as high risk. And we are living in a world, unfortunately, where the system we have, the current healthcare system we have, is very much focused on pathology. So when you go as a pregnant woman for your well sort of anticipated appointments, and all you kind of looked at is, oh, you're too big, your baby's too small, your blood pressure's too high, too low, you're too fat, you're not fat enough. You know, it just goes on and on and on in terms of the things that could be a problem being the focus rather than everything that is going well. So what I was going to do today was just to give you a little bit of an overview of what brought me to work with fertility and conception the way that I do, and why I feel it's so important that we recognize how invested, if you invest in this early time, if you actually consider a good year before you think about being pregnant, ideally, that this is the journey that you start to embark on in terms of clearing out the cupboards of whatever baggage you have inherited and getting healthy in body, mind, and heart and spirit to be able to bring in a soul that's coming. This is the best gift you can give your baby, because we know that those first 1,001 days of a baby's life really set them up for life. And I give the analogy of a traumatized pet, so a cat or a dog that's been traumatized early in life. They don't tend to recover. They're always nervous dogs, or they're always nervous cats, and this goes with many other animals too. But as humans too, the way that our brain develops in the womb is going to be largely developed, and not just the brain, but all of our physiology, our immune system, our ability to combat stress, to feel safe in the world, you name it, is going to come from how well mum is. And how well mum is really how much stress is in her life, what is the quality of her relationship with herself, her partner, her work life, her perception of life, and how does she feel about connecting with this growing life inside of her in such a way that is more about sort of really feeling into what's actually happening, and how being pregnant is changing this woman, and actually having the tools to be able to cope with that, rather than just kind of growing a baby, trying to get on with life as best you can and doing a few bits here and there because you hear it's good for the baby, but not really taking the journey that is offered. Because in the yoga tradition, we know that, you know, a woman grows spiritually in the 9 months that she grows a baby. The sort of parallel would be to spend 20 years on a mountain in isolation to kind of get the depth of insight that it's a hormonal roller coaster, but it's also a whole journey into what I say are ghosts in the nursery, which is the effects of how we were parented, the cellular memory we have that is within our story, if you like. And therefore, when we're growing a life, what that actually brings up for us. I'm going to try and kind of bridge the physical and the spiritual for you as much as possible, but to give you an idea that, you know, we all say when a woman's pregnant, if she's looking healthy, she's glowing, right? And that's like the light of another soul in her body. And we know also, I've worked with thousands of women, over 5,000 women and their partners and their growing babies over the years that I've been working in the capacity that I do. And you know, we know that this glow is like there to help them to kind of awaken whatever they need to bring in what is going to serve their babies. So women are incredibly psychic when they're pregnant. They're a lot more sensitive when they're pregnant, because they're basically dealing with the information their baby is giving them as well about how they are and what they need and how they're going to grow. I could go on that tangent, but I might leave it for later. I'm going to bring this right back to the start, and hopefully through a few case studies as well, be able to help you to get a more rounded view of what it means to really prepare. So in terms of what this live stream is all about, I know that a lot of the time women feel they have the choice between trying to conceive naturally, and if they can't conceive naturally, then conceiving through assisted fertility methods, and this is most commonly known as IVF. Okay, but those choices really both are, the success is maximized by the pre-work I'm talking about doing, which is not the kind of work that will be covered by an IVF clinic when you go and you have your initial appointment, or you go to your GP and you say you're having trouble conceiving, you've been trying for X amount of time. And in both instances, whether there's going to need to be some kind of assistance or whether you're going to be able to conceive naturally, the inner work is yours for life. It is the work that helps you feel safe in yourself. And this is where I touch on something called womb ecology, which is also something you could look at as womb toxicity, which is how do you feel about this organ that creates life? How do you feel about your sexuality? How do you feel about your creativity? How do you feel about your fertility? What is your relationship between the fact that the hormones that make babies birth babies? And what does trying mean as well? Because the moment that you start trying, you are inferring that something is difficult. Now, obviously, we use that term to say, well, we are actively pursuing the idea of having a baby. So we're not on contraception. We know when we're ovulating, and we are making a commitment to try and make a baby, right? That's what it comes to. But the trying is much of the issue, because really, when the hormones are flowing between two people who love each other and want to bring another person into the world, then the physiology is working well. But we are living in a world where stress factors that are essentially environmental stress factors are really working against us. So what that means is stress at work. Stress at work, whether it's the commute, whether it's what you do in your day job, whether you're sitting in front of a computer all day, whether you're on the phone all day, what the commute is like on the way back. Like, if you think of that whole journey of that day, is it a part of your day that you actually enjoy, or is it a part of your day that you endure in order to have the things that you have in your spare time, which will be the time that you're at home in the evenings, and also the time that you have on the weekends, or however your life actually works. Now, usually what happens is the more stressful the work life is, so the less enjoyable it is, the more we compensate for that in our time off with self-soothing habits, which are probably not very good for us. So on a positive extreme, you could say, well, we might go and hammer it down at the gym, or we might enjoy some kind of endurance sport that kind of gets the stress out. But what that is doing is exhausting our adrenal glands. It's exhausting the nervous system. And one of the key factors I have seen that is an issue with fertility is the endocrine and the nervous system being out of whack. So I'll go back into environmental factors in a moment, but the majority of human beings that I see operating, struggling to have a baby, are in a heightened state of alert, so in a stress response. So the sympathetic nervous system is more prevalent than the parasympathetic, and that means they're generally more anxious, more stressed, more angry, more nervous, more depressed, and they can oscillate between sort of apathy and mania as well. Welcome, Denise. Welcome, everybody. If you have questions as I'm talking, then please do put them down, and I will do my best to address them as we go on. So, you know, we may consider that it's a healthy thing to be doing what I've just said, so exercising in an extreme way as a way of dealing with the stress of the week. And then maybe we justify that because we've done that, we eat a high carb diet, and maybe it feels okay to then be drinking quite a bit, and we kind of justify that little cycle there, and it can feel quite good because we're buzzy. But we're buzzy in a kind of that way rather than in a nice chilled way where we're actually nurturing and nourishing ourselves. We're kind of meeting that work hard, play hard idea in a certain way. Another way that we do it is obviously the work hard, play hard means that when we're off, we're drinking, we're smoking, we're distracting ourselves, we're comfort eating, we are shopping, we are staying out late, we're doing all sorts of things. Or maybe we're at home and we're really bored and we just watch television and we don't do much. I don't know what you do. I'm just kind of giving you an idea that usually when I'm working with people that are having some kind of challenge, there is always something within the house that needs addressing. There is always something within the lifestyle that needs addressing. And typically those folk that feel like they're doing everything right and they're still not getting pregnant, it means they'll be ticking things off the list. They go for acupuncture, they are seeing a nutritionist, they come to a gentle yoga class, they eat healthy. And I always check in with my clients what healthy means, because for the most part, many people who are trying to conceive these days believe that healthy is like a high carb, low fat, high protein diet. And it's the low fat that's a really big issue. And I'm not talking about any old fat. I'm not talking about trans fatty acids and the fats that are not good for you, but I'm talking about high purine fat particularly we need, which red meat's been given a bad press for a long time, as has dairy, and any kind of highly processed dairy and highly processed meat isn't going to be that good for you. But what is key here is to understand that high carbohydrate diets spike our adrenaline levels, and they again increase the nervous system is sort of working in such a way that it's overworked rather than in a homeostasis that is allowing it to rest, repair, feed and breed, which is what we need. And obviously if you live and you have a sedentary lifestyle, then you're going to need to do some kind of daily exercise. But the key isn't to batter your body. When I work with clients that do exercise a lot, often the type of exercise that they're doing during when they're ovulating or when they're menstruating is not ideal for helping their hormones to regulate. And the offset of that again is the sort of pull towards the carbohydrates to get the energy to keep doing the cycle they're doing. So back to this idea of ticking everything off the list as well, because the ticking off the list is really, I'm being a good girl, I'm doing everything right, so I should get the results that I want. And you can be doing the things externally that are right, but if inside of you, you don't feel safe to be a parent, if inside of you, you don't feel safe to grow a baby, and there can be many reasons for that, then it's going to be very difficult to actually grow one. Okay, so one of the questions I've kind of written down here as the start is, why aren't we getting pregnant? You know, what's actually going on here that is causing an issue? Or why are we being led to believe that it is difficult to get pregnant? And one of the questions I would ask you is, how much unprocessed pain are you in? And by that I mean psychological and emotional pain. Also, how much physical pain are you in? Because we know that, you know, any type of pharmaceutical drug that we actually take will affect our fertility. Pain relief does come at a price, and often I've found through working with fertility clients that they can be heavily reliant on painkillers during their menstrual time because they're in a lot of pain. Now, if they're in a lot of pain, then we have to look at why we're in a lot of pain. And generally speaking, the people that come to me will be addressing physical symptoms. Hi, Mandy. First, which is great. It needs to be looked at. They're seeing a nutritionist usually. As I said, they're doing the kind of acupuncture and the yoga, and they're still not getting pregnant. So for me, this is then something where I need to look a little bit deeper and look at the emotional and psychological reasons why this is happening. But for those who haven't looked at those basics first, for those who are not seeing a nutritionist and doing the basic lifestyle changing things that need to happen, it's imperative to look at that first. Because if you go and you just, you know, try and maximize your chances of getting pregnant through IVF or, you know, the different apps and so on that occur, and you're not really looking at what you're putting in your body and how it's affecting you, then that's going to cause a problem. And we know there's the basics of caffeine, sugar, not having a healthy gut, which affects so many of us. You know, if you've had a history of antibiotics, as I said, you're on any kind of long-term medication or you take painkillers, these are all factors that point to the fact that you're likely to have some kind of inflammation in your body. Same with the food choices that you're taking. And as a result, the known gynecological issues and the known issues that men can have that can affect fertility are very much diet and lifestyle related. And it may be something from way back that hasn't been addressed. For example, you may have taken antibiotics 2 years ago, but your microbiome, so your own gut health, has not actually got better. And this may be because of the food choices that you're making. So if you love sugar, you're feeding the bacteria in your gut that isn't healthy rather than the healthy bacteria in your gut. So there's always an imbalance. And as a result of that, it leads to issues with the, Candida, you may well have heard of, thrush. Both the endocrine system will be affected and the nervous system. And as a result of that, thyroid issues are very common. All sorts of things are common that we kind of say, right, this is a reason why you're not getting pregnant. Let's treat it with this drug. But again, what you're doing is, instead of looking at the causal factors that need to be addressed, because they're going to be what help you to have a healthy pregnancy and a healthy baby at the end of it, are not happening. So I want to kind of go a little bit into some of the statistics that I deal with and sort of explain a little bit about mine. But just before I do, that whole unprocessed pain thing is very important, whether it's physical, emotional, psychological. And take this idea, and I'm going a little bit a bit deep with this right now, but what do you remember about your parents saying to you in terms of you coming into their life, like how easy or how difficult it was to have you, or how much of a burden you were, or how much of a joy you were? What were the overall messages that you got about being brought into the world? It's very important to look back on that, because I know that I have worked with clients who have had many unmet needs themselves, and by hook or by crook they've got pregnant, and they've had a difficult, challenging pregnancy. It's been all about them, not the baby, because they've got these unprocessed pains and, you know, emotional and physical. So it's all about them, not the baby. And then, of course, the baby's born. More often than not, the pregnancy wasn't straightforward, so the birth wasn't straightforward. So there's trauma at the birth, which then affects the baby's ability to digest. It affects the baby's ability to sleep. It affects the baby's ability to bond, to enjoy, to be in relationship with the world without being in a high state of stress, because that's what the mother was in. And as a result, the whole thing about wanting to have a family and enjoying being a parent can then seem more like a burden than a blessing. And again, it's not often talked about, but it is important to address that high stress in pregnancy leads to terrible complications, including the potential for babies being born prematurely. And if they are born prematurely, they may need to be in a neonatal unit, which means they're then separated from their mother and their father. They're not getting the early bonding time. They're not getting the early sensory experiences that they need to have in order to develop optimally. And although the services are becoming more and more aware of what is needed to support the repair work, we're very much on the back foot still in terms of what is needed and what is actually happening. So it can be that we take our babies home and then we have a lifetime, really, as they're growing up, of trying to support them to overcome the trauma that they experienced, and also for us to overcome the trauma that we have experienced. And this is why it's not about getting pregnant at all costs. And it's why when I work with my clients, I really try and instill that the healthier and happier you are before you get pregnant, that is going to maximize your chances of conceiving naturally. It's going to double your chances of conceiving through IVF. And it's going to mean that you are much more likely to have a viable pregnancy to term, an enjoyable birth, which is not racked with complications, and therefore the ability to bond more easily, to feed your baby more easily, and to help your baby to soothe their nervous system along with yours, so that good sleep habits can be developed. Because sleep deprivation, we know, is by far one of the worst forms of torture, and it affects babies and parents in such a way that it can really affect everybody in the house. It can increase risk factors of losing your job because you're not effective at work. It can put huge strain on your relationship because you're both stressed, and it also impacts your health, and it impacts your baby's health. So your baby's more prone to have health issues that may require surveillance or medication, and that all comes at a price. So, you know, when we're stressed financially, emotionally, physically, psychologically, then we really are minimizing our chances of thriving. And like I said before, it's like so much of this is preventable, that the key time to really be looking at this is before you look at, I need help with conceiving through IVF, through assisted fertility means, through drugs. And if I have got a gynecological issue or an issue that is showing up for a man or a woman relating to why we're not getting pregnant, rather than treating that with drugs first, I need to look at my lifestyle choices. I need to look at how well I am in my physical, emotional, and psychological profile, how well we are as a unit before we can actually procreate and know that we're going to have an enjoyable experience of it. A midwife I know once was writing a dissertation on the enjoyment rather than the endurance of labour, and in the end, she actually had 3 cesareans herself because she was so traumatized by what she had seen in terms of women not being prepared for giving birth, and as a result of that, having traumatic times. And this is exactly the same thing that I'm talking about. It's not about being prepared for birth, it's about being prepared for parenthood. Now, I am the mother of a nearly 18-year-old daughter who has been challenged by undiagnosed mental health issues all of her life. It looks like she is to be diagnosed soon, which is great, and it looks like she's showing up with symptoms of female ADHD. Now, 18 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, female ADHD wasn't really even known about. There was ADHD, and you either had it or you didn't. Now, the risk factors that kind of contributed to her developing the behavioral symptoms, if you like, of not having her early needs met because I wasn't prepared as a young mother and I didn't know what I know now. You know, we carry the story with us for our lives. You know, I know that I was the product of a low-fat, low-sugar diet myself. My mum was all about the Rosemary Connolly and the fat-free, sugar-free fads, which anyone who goes to any kind of weight club will be, you know, interested in these sin-free foods, which are actually anything but sin-free. We think we're being healthy because we're using artificial sweeteners instead of sugar, and we're having skim milk instead of full fat and all the rest of it. But all of these things are causing problems in our bodies. And when you have a predisposition towards either a physical or a mental health issue, how well a woman is and how well a man is before they conceive and during the pregnancy journey will determine the genetic expression at birth and moving forward. So the whole nature-nurture debate isn't a debate. They both play a role. You have precursors and you have protagonists. And so the precursor can be there as a predisposition. My daughter's dad had ADHD, but the protagonists were the lifestyle choices, the high-stress pregnancy that I had, and as a result of that, the challenging birth, and then the high-needs baby. And very soon in my daughter's life, I was a single mum, so effectively she had a high-stress childhood, and none of these things supported her to thrive. So she ended up going through all sorts of her own internal journey in her teenhood, which was really challenging and difficult for me to support her with because of my own unmet needs and all that had happened in my life and my daily stresses. So you kind of see the impact of life, and everybody has their journey to go through, but how much of the pain that we go through can be minimized really does then determine this question of prevention being better than cure. We're all going to go through challenges in life, we're all going to go through struggles in life, but minimizing them and learning that everything that we do has an impact on the generations that follow helps us to then to start making smart choices about how we prepare for parenthood. So I'm just going to give you some facts to consider, and you know, the story I'm just sharing with you is really to give you an idea of why I care so much about preparing parents to be parents rather than just getting them pregnant at all costs. I have a very high success rate, much higher than the statistics that are published by IVF clinics, but I work in a very holistic way. And for me, it is really important not just to look at the physical things we do to prepare holistically, but also the emotional and the psychological, because we carry trauma from one generation to the next. My work as an energy healer, as a Reiki master, as a yoga teacher, as an intuitive empath, as a emotional mental detox coach, supporting people to heal early life trauma and later life trauma, has really taught me that this work is imperative, because part of the reason why we're just not getting pregnant is because we're not well enough to get pregnant, and we can force the issue. But life is basically saying, deal with your stuff first, rather than dumping your stuff on the next generation to deal with. And in the American Indian traditions, they say that tribally they will consider the impact of any decision they make on the next 7 generations to come. Now, the current way we are living is certainly not thinking about the next 7 generations. And when I talked earlier about birth in the age of plastics, the more we are synthesizing birth, the more we are having to synthesize pregnancy, fertility. So the more that we are increasing artificial hormones in the process of giving birth, and the more that we are medicalizing it, the more that we are interfering with the natural processes that are meant to occur, the more challenges are coming from one generation to the next moving forward, and we're having a harder time bringing babies into the world. Think about it. If your body didn't know how to go into labor naturally, then how is it going to know to conceive naturally? If it didn't know how to conceive naturally, how is it going to know how to go into labor naturally? So we start seeing a need for the interventions that occur. And I'm sure if you're watching this, you're thinking, pregnancy, birth, what? I just want to get pregnant at this stage. But you don't think about these things until they're on your doorstep. And, you know, most women I work with, they are just thinking about getting pregnant. And if they haven't dealt with their fears of being pregnant, then they're scared the whole pregnancy, because they've been trying for so long, Then once they're pregnant, they're terrified of losing the baby. And then in the pregnancy, they're then terrified of anything going wrong in the labour. So they want as much support as possible. So this can often mean, you know, being in a labour ward rather than a birth centre or at home, because the safety is perceived in the labour ward, even though that's not necessarily the case. And as a result of that, they're more likely to have interventions that are going to lead to some kind of recovery needed, both for mother and baby. And that then has an impact, as we said, on what happens later. So this is why I look at the whole thing, because I see the impact from before a woman gets pregnant on the way she lives her life, the way she shows up in the world, how she feels about herself, her partner, the whole reason she wants to get pregnant, and then how much she enjoys the process of going from being a woman to being a mother. And then what happens in the partnership, what happens in the family home post having had the babies, because it's not just about having the baby. It is definitely about preparing for the whole journey. So statistically, I have some statistics here from way back. In 2015, it's suggested that 1 in 6 couples are struggling to conceive. So that is 15% of the population, the Western population, and rising. 25 to 28% are unexplained causes. 26 to 50% of these issues are with the male reproductive system. Think about how often a woman is doing everything she can, and dad's not. The problem's not with him, it's with her. And he's often quite reluctant to make any changes, because he feels the fact that he only drinks on such and such a day and such a day, it's enough that he's made that change. And actually, you know, I talk about endocrine disruptive chemicals being a huge factor, and that's your aftershave, that's your sprays in the house with the nice synthetic smells, that's your cleaning products, that's your makeup, that's your body lotions, that's everything that you might work around in your day-to-day life. If you're a hairdresser, or you're in construction, or you're in agriculture, you know, water, tap water is full of things that kill off good bacteria, and this is to do more with your microbiome and your gut, but this is linked with your endocrine system. All of the internal systems link together. So the diet, the lifestyle, the exposure to chemicals plays a much bigger part than we realize, because it's affecting how our body is actually working and where it's at in terms of whether it can rest and repair properly or not. And depending on the stress factors in your life, that will determine, again, how safe it is inside of you to be able to actually grow a life. So dads also need to consider the early messages that they got when they were growing up about whether they were a burden or a pleasure, about whether they perceived that they somehow caused problems for their families. I mean, as children, when we come from, for example, parents who have separated, we will often feel that it was our fault that they separated. And if you think about it, look at it from the adult point of view, the stress factor of bringing children into a relationship that isn't that healthy, as in it's you know, we're having children because that's what you do at this stage, but we're not entirely enamored with each other at this stage, or we are, but we have a very immature sense of what love is, and we're rushing things along. and then the strain of having a child means that the relationship doesn't last. And it's not because of the baby, it's not the baby's fault, but this was a stress factor that added in. So your own early life perceptions will influence how safe you feel to become a parent, whether you're a man or a woman. Back to statistics, 41 to 60% of the issues are with the female reproductive system. Now, current IVF figures published by Create show that the standard IVF treatment is 25% effective overall, i.e. in 10 rounds of IVF, 2.5 will result in a live full-term birth. 2.5. Typically, a round of IVF is between £3,000 and £5,000. Create is a private clinic. IVF rates go down in success depending on the age of a woman starting treatment. Now, I talk a lot about the fact that it's not age that's the issue, it's vitality and vibrancy, and I've just told you a whole load of reasons why that's so important. Then we look at the different statistics for different age groups, and I've got a couple of different printouts on that. So something that was given to me today, which is probably more current, under the age of 35, 29% success rate. 35 to 37, 23% success rate. 38 to 39, 15% success rate. 40 to 42 years of age, 9% success rate. 9. IVF, 9. 43 to 44 age, 3%. And over 44, 2% chance of a live birth. Okay, so again, in terms of how these figures are for women using their own eggs and their partner's sperm and use the per embryo transferred measure. So, and those are statistics that say that below percentages show the average chance of a birth from IVF treatment depending on a woman's age. Okay, that does not factor in if the baby is healthy. It does not factor in if the birth is traumatic. It does not factor in how well the baby is post-birth and if they actually have their own health issues as a result. So I feel it's very important to state that, because the NHS offers IVF if you are under the age of 43. And it claims a 40% success rate if under 35 years old, whereas the national success rate is apparently 29%. So if you know anything about statistics, you know they're very easy to play around with. And, you know, it's really important to remember that people who are seeking to have babies really will do anything. And so money is a huge factor. It plays a huge part in people's choices in terms of what they're actually going to do. And very often, you know, the question is, why would they come and work with me and spend £5,000 or more to work with me one-to-one before they have IVF if they're going to need a round or another or 2 rounds or God knows how many rounds of IVF to conceive? You know, this is the question, why would you? And this is why I'm here talking to you and saying, why wouldn't you? Because in the end, you might have, you know, I've got to go back to the statistics, they're just crazy. As a 44-year-old woman, you might have a 3% chance. Let's just say a 9% chance as a 40-year-old woman of conceiving through IVF. Well, working with me first is going to double that on the basis that you're doing all the other work that helps to maximize your chances, rather than just relying on taking the current methods that are used to take a sperm and an egg that normally would not result in a pregnancy and doing whatever they can to actually make that result in a pregnancy. You understand that if the health of the sperm and the egg is questionable in the first place, then there is going to be an increased risk factor of that child having abnormalities, and therefore a more complicated high-risk pregnancy that might not even go to term. And with the people that I've worked with, I mean, I have quite a large sample of women who are over the age of 40. Obviously, I work with women who have no known gynecological issues as to why they aren't getting pregnant, and they're not over the age of 40. But typically, it's usually stress factors, and it is to do with the fact that they are not feeling safe about becoming a mum. And there are different reasons why, which I go into when I'm working with them. And it is a lot of detective work. But relationship with mother, relationship with father, clearing out the subconscious programming that creates a feeling of anxiety and panic and unsafety around bringing a child into the world is a huge factor in being able to clear the issues that are there. And that doesn't happen when you go for your appointments, either with your GP or your IVF specialist. And again, I'm not talking against the system as it is. I think everybody is doing the best they can. I work a lot with specialists in the scientific and the medical world, and they're fascinating and amazing people. They're really just in their thing. They get what they do and they're deeply committed to it, like looking in a microscope and seeing things you'd never normally see. What I'm really good at is seeing how everything is connected up, and how when you kind of look at someone's full profile, you can then see, oh, it's this that we need to go to first. And then from there, if we're not getting the results that we need, we dig deeper. And typically the women that work with me will get pregnant within a year, 6 to 12 months after they have worked with me for 3 months, either through my one-to-one or my group coaching. And, you know, my current success rate is about 82%. And that's not counting women I'm currently working with who are seeking to conceive. Sometimes, you know, women change their mind. Sometimes they do the deep work and realize that the motives for wanting to have a baby are such that they're actually really not ready to have one yet, and that's not what they really want at the moment. Or maybe they recognize that they've actually gone through so much that they need some time themselves. And if you didn't see Despina's video, she was talking about that. This is a woman who had been trying for 7 years, had had 5 failed rounds of IVF because she had an issue with her egg reserve. And, you know, again, the current testing measures we have are not infallible and they are questionable. And one of the more recent sort of looks at egg reserves, ovarian reserves, is the fact that we have stem cells that mean that we can produce eggs from these stem cells after we've been born, whereas the way that things have been thought to this point is that we are born with all of our eggs, and therefore if you have a low ovarian reserve, that's not going to change. But I've seen women, not just one, but several, in their time working with me, their physiology changes. So if there's a chromosomal disorder, because they're shifting their mindset, because they're shifting their perception of themselves and the world, that chromosomal disorder is not showing up because the genes are expressing themselves differently, because the way a woman's perceiving her environment has changed, the way she's perceiving herself has changed. Ovarian reserves go up, so egg reserves go up, they double. You know, I have some testimonials on the Conceive with Ease page where you can read about that, but I think it's helpful maybe to read a couple of testimonials and to bear in mind that, so if you've got a woman who has, you know, I've come across women who've conceived naturally, first child, and then they've not been able to conceive after that, or they had a tremendously difficult time conceiving the first time, and then they've had really difficult time conceiving since then. And again, you have to ask the question, well, what's happened? Was the previous pregnancy traumatic? Was the previous birth traumatic? What was the recovery time like after? What did this woman do to recover? Has she recovered her microbiome? Has she reduced the stress factors in her life? Has she healed emotionally and psychologically from the previous birth? If not, any kind of assisted fertility methods that are used post you know, first baby to help another baby come along are not likely to be effective, because if the body has not recovered yet, it is not recovered. If the emotional, psychological imprint has not recovered yet, then it's not going to be conducive to getting pregnant again, because we just don't feel safe. So I have a lady who had a really difficult time conceiving her first child, and it was actually an obstetrician in London, or a fertility specialist in London, who was kind of known as being the miracle baby maker, that helped her to conceive her first baby. And she came to me for pregnancy yoga, and then she got in touch as I'd created the Conceive with Ease program, because she had had several pregnancies since her first child, but they had all ended in miscarriage. And this was both through IVF and naturally. And what had happened was she'd had a traumatic birth, and she had had to have surgery afterwards, and this had really affected her emotionally. And she was trying to get pregnant on top of this, but her body had not recovered, and neither had her emotional and psychological state. And some real issues had come up about her bond with her mother as well, and her relationship with her mother. And any of us who have a perception of our mothers not having met our needs, narcissism, all that kind of thing, will have challenges in terms of reconciling our relationship with our babies, because we either find ourselves replicating the behavior or we are overcompensating. So most recently I was lucky to be at a training called Sensory Babies, which was aimed at occupational therapists who work in neonatal units with prem babies, or with early intervention for children with developmental issues. And again, they banged on and on and on about the first 1,001 days of a child's life and how important they are in forming the capacity to develop optimally. And that's, motor development, cognitive development, it's speech, language, same thing, well, not quite, speech, audio, sensory. And what came out of it is the fact that learning to read a baby's cues is so important in terms of not overstimulating them by being totally in their face, over-parenting, and not understimulating them either, and being able to tell the difference. Now, I'm going to take this back to something I was going to say earlier to you, which is most of us are walking around with unmet needs and also a sense of being traumatized babies that didn't have our needs met as children by very well-meaning parents more often than not. I know I didn't meet the needs of my baby. I didn't know how to read her cues. I was so excited about having a baby that I totally mollycoddled her. I overloved her in such a way that I was so in her face, and I didn't respect her personal boundaries. Well, guess what? Who respected my personal boundaries? No one. And this is how it goes, is that people who are in emotional and psychological pain don't really know the warning signals of going into some kind of pain. So whether it's physical, emotional, psychological, we often don't know until we're really in pain that we're in pain, because the pre-pain signals have not been observed. And this comes back to these early cues with our babies, and why it's significant to become more sensitive to ourselves and our partnership and our environment and our lifestyle choices before we seek to grow a baby. Hello, Maria. Because in so doing, we're going to be able to meet the needs of our children much more easily. Okay, and that's what it comes to, is it's this investment of the better you are, the better your chances are of creating what you actually want. But I see a lot of sweeping under the carpet that goes on in our lives. A lot of, don't look over here, it's not comfortable, I'm not going to do that. Well, so-and-so didn't need to do that and they got pregnant, so I'm not going to need to do that. I'm just going to do what this good doctor says because I like what they're saying. It fits within my current narrative of what I believe is and isn't. It means I don't really have to change too much. I'll just take my chances. And, typically a lot of my clients work in the corporate world. They're high flyers. They are used to sort of working hard, and their value is very much placed on their achievements. And pregnancy is very much about being out of control rather than in control. And anyone who's experienced early pregnancy will know that your sense of smell goes, you feel incredibly tired. You may feel like you've got a baby growing, an alien growing inside of you, which effectively you have, because that's the placenta that's made of the male DNA that comes from the sperm. And then you've got a being that you're going to be responsible for the rest of your life, also growing inside of you. And all of this is going on while you're trying to carry on as usual and not let your game drop, because, your sense of who you are is very much invested with what you can achieve and the results that you get. And actually, the whole process of parenting is one much more of being rather than doing, because our children don't really listen to what we say. They emulate what we do, and they do it subconsciously. It's all in the early programming of the first 7 years of life, that they just observe. They are sponges for what's going on around them, and they are basically taking in the idea that what is going on around them is normal and is something to model. And of course, as they get older and then they're capable of basically forming their own opinions, that's going to be more impacted by their peers, by their teachers, by the media, by what they expose themselves to. So again, it's not an authentic self-inquiry that occurs. We're basically programmed by our outer environment. So All of these factors are big. They play a huge part in these statistics that I'm talking about. I'll come back to some other testimonials in a second, but if anyone has any questions, please don't hesitate to ask them. I feel it is imperative, when, especially with working with the high-flying women, or any woman who considers herself to be anxious or easily stressed or is a warrior, is to really shift that programming, because the nervous system, the digestive system, and the cardiovascular system are all formed in the first few weeks of life. A fetus will have a heartbeat 4 to 5 weeks gestation. And if these three systems are so interlinked and they are formed, you know, often just as you find out you're pregnant, then if you haven't started to learn to deal with yourself and your fears and your anxieties and the things you worry about, and to start to shift your mindset and your perception of the world before you're actually pregnant, then the way that you see things is the imprint you are giving the growing fetus, embryo that becomes a fetus that becomes a baby. And so I often talk to people about understanding that a mother's like a periscope feeding information to her growing baby about the world that the baby's going to be born into. And we know that babies that are born to high stress pregnancies, so that is chronic stress, that's feeling stressed every day. And that's quite normal for you. So if your job is stressful, you're stressed every day, right? So you just take that as an idea. It's like you're not in a state of enjoying most of the time and then occasionally stressed. You're stressed most of the time and you're occasionally enjoying yourself. If that's your truth, then that's what needs to shift first and foremost, because we know that the hind part of the brain, which is more primitive, so the primitive, you've got the limbic system, you've got the reptilian system, which is the brainstem, then the limbic, then the neocortex. And so the neocortex will only develop optimally in pregnancies that have a little bit of stress in them but are not characterized by high stress environment consistently. The hindbrain will develop more in high stress pregnancies, and that's the kind of fight, flight, freeze, think, act first, think later. So the faculties for critical thinking, for developing emotional intelligence, for being able to read things not from a perception of danger first, but from a position of inquiry, of curiosity, of thirst for life, isn't there. It's much more about, I must protect myself against this threat, I must protect myself against this threat, and we're born with that. So, you know, this is why I want you to think about it right now. You know, if you have been seeking to get pregnant, where are you in your stress levels? Where are you in your fear levels? I wrote about this somewhere here in all my notes, which I've written copious amounts of, as usual. Let's see if we can find something that really is a nice, good thing to go with. Is it in here? Talked about the unmet needs. It's going to be something that I have put down here. Okay. So let's go back to some figures. One of the, again, factors that I will talk about, what is infertility? So the inability to produce healthy enough sperm and eggs to fuse and support healthy cell division. The inability to form a healthy enough placenta from the sperm DNA to support the continuing growth of fetus into a baby. This is infertility, right? This is whether you're not getting pregnant in the first place or you are ending up with repeat miscarriages. Those two factors I just mentioned are important. The mother's body is a rejection of the father's sperm, killer cells, inflammation. This is a physical body that is not healthy. Even if we are eating right, the body is not in a healthy state to be growing a baby. The father's sperm is attacking itself. Ditto. It's not in a healthy state. Essentially, it's the inability to create and grow healthy offspring. What is the fundamental cause? Either the mother or the father or both body-mind systems are not operating in an optimal way to support long-term parenthood. The answer? Treat the cause before the symptoms. Our current medical system treats symptoms, not causes. If you don't deal with the cause, you are just passing it on to the next generation. So, I know this is controversial, but actually to consider the challenges you are having conceiving or staying pregnant as a blessing is an amazing starting point, because this really allows you to see that there is a higher order, there is a reason why you're not getting pregnant, and when you align with being the best optimal state you can be to bring a baby into this world or to be a parent, then you are opening yourself up to the most exquisite and delightful experience you can have. Rather than the endurance, it becomes the enjoyment. So how can you maximize your chances of conceiving naturally and double your chances of success with IVF? Well, this is really what I do. You create balance and harmony within your own body, mind, and then train with your partners for maximum success. This is important. Your relationship is important. The key is to minimize all environmental factors in your lives that antagonize your intention to conceive. Learning to manage stress in everyday life without suppressing emotional, physical, and psychological pain, really important. Maximize vitality, nutrition in your life. This means, discovering what this means for you. It's different for all of us to a degree, but it can pretty much guarantee that it's going to be getting rid of sugar, refined carbohydrates, reducing carbohydrates, and grains. We've been taught grains are really good for you. Some whole foods are, but you've got to really listen to your body and just notice how it responds. Yes, there is a case for superfoods, but mainly it's going to be about gut flora, which is going to be your fermented foods. Minimizing exposure to endocrine disruptive chemicals by making all necessary changes to what you put on and in your body and home environment. It's also vital that your conscious will and subconscious programming are in alignment. Often negative experiences in the womb and early life lock out into our subconscious mind that it's not safe to become a parent. How is that? Well, as I said to you, we log our experiences in our cellular memory. We log our mother's experiences in our cellular memory. So if our mother had something very stressful happen, for example, in my life, my great-grandmother had to flee for her life when she had a toddler son and was pregnant with my maternal grandmother after her husband had been beheaded. And this was when, in the southern part of Turkey, there was a Greek colony. And when the Turks took over, it's just what happened. This is what happened. So my grandmother was a pretty big stress head, addicted to sugar as a way of coping. She ended up with diabetes, was pretty mentally imbalanced as a result of that. My mum, she died at 63. She did have 3 children, 4 children. A stillborn was the first one because her addiction to sugar led to having a huge baby. She was diabetic, gestational diabetes, though they didn't know at the time. So she almost died at birth. Her son died at birth. So then she's carrying my mum and her twin brother in a womb where she's traumatized because she's already given birth to a stillborn. So they are surrounded by fear. And if you kind of look at the way her twin and my mum actually live life, you couldn't be more different in how they coped with that high stress environment. But my mum was a complete stress head control freak. Her twin brother's much more about, having fun and pleasure in life and all sorts of nice kind of, how do I put it? Just enjoy life. Don't really look at the deep stuff, project out. Mum was much more about controlling everything to feel safe. And, in the end, died young at 60 with colon cancer, secondary in the liver, unprocessed emotions, lots of rage, bottling things up, not feeling safe, to be honest. My sister and I are her children. We've had to work through huge issues around emotional anxiety, fear, feeling safe in the world. I've already mentioned the story with my daughter. This is 5-generation blueprint I'm giving you at the moment. And I have obviously worked incredibly hard to shift what goes on in here so that I'm generally calm and relaxed and happy most of the time, 95% of the time, I'd say, as opposed to being stressed and worried and anxious 95% of the time. That's been my personal shift. Now, I don't want to have more babies personally, but I really love supporting others to make that shift before they have babies because I know the impact. And if you don't deal with it, you are passing on the damage that you have experienced to your child. And what I mean by that is it's represented by your nervous system and endocrine system blueprint. It's represented by the health of your body and how you handle stress, how you handle emotional and psychological pain, because you're passing that blueprint down. And if you're interested in this kind of work, you can read Dr. Bruce Lipton's books, The Biology of Belief and The Honeymoon Effect, because they kind of explain the science of it in a really elegant way. Pause for breath. So these factors that I just mentioned are very, very important. And I also mentioned that balancing your hormones are really important. And I've said that the reason this is important is they underpin our ability to reproduce, to regenerate, and to prevent and heal disease. Our ovaries and testes are part of the endocrine system. Endocrine disruptive chemicals cause an issue with this. And I mentioned as well the microbiome, which is the gut flora. Our nervous system is affected by this as well, because the food choices we make also affect whether we're processing sugar or not, or we're processing fat. And the way that the body processes fuel will affect how calm we are, or how much we go up and down, go up and down. So actually the food choices we make contribute to how anxious, depressed, tired we feel, as do the things we put in our bodies and in our homes. Our hormones are messed with as women from the moment we take any hormonal contraception. This does affect fertility as well. For those conceiving through IVF, hormones are out of balance from before conception. Also, the whole process of IVF can lead to you having your system, your menstrual cycle deregulated. So a menopause is kind of created, and then they regulate your cycle again through synthetic hormones. Online, I saw that you can purchase unlimited IVF for something like £9,000 plus. It starts from £9,000 plus. And, you know, I can imagine for someone who thinks, gosh, I want to maximize my chances of getting pregnant and I don't know how long it's going to take me, so this sounds like a good package. What comes with it? You know, how much you're polluting your body with synthetic hormones, with drugs, with procedures that require antibiotics and then require recovery. These leave an impact. It's not guilt-free. Nothing that we do will not leave an impact on the body. Energy medicine leaves a positive impact on the body, but the kind of current system where we're feeding the body drugs all the time and procedures is traumatic, and it leaves its mark. And that's why I said having a baby at all costs is something we have to be very careful about. Again, synthetic hormones and naturally produced hormones do not work in the same way. Balancing your hormones naturally maximizes the chances of success. And I have other testimonials here that are really quite interesting, but I just want to check before I start to bring this to some kind of close. Here we are. Men's hormones are out of balance, are as out of balance as women's. And this is again going to affect their sperm quality. And whether internal or external factors are at fault, balanced hormones are the result of a healthy body-mind system. So unhealthy parents produce unhealthy offspring. So it is really important to get healthy. And if if you're having trouble conceiving, then just accept, without getting defensive about it, that there is potentially some kind of block, physically, emotionally, or psychologically. Even if you've had all these tests and all the rest of it, and everything's showing up as A-OK, and there's no reason why. So at the start of this, we kind of talked about why you would look to do something different if you have been trying for years and you've had several rounds of IVF that have failed. You can't get pregnant again even though you've had a baby. You've had one miscarriage after another and gynecological surgery. You have no medical reason you're not conceiving, or you're over the age of 40. So for me, as I said, most of the complex cases that I've worked with of clients that have had real trouble conceiving and in the end have worked with me, worked with my Conceive with Ease program, then got pregnant, are over the age of 40. They're in their late 30s or over the age of 40. And, you know, this is what it's all about, is getting vital, getting healthy, understanding that chromosomal issues shift, understanding that if you have had trauma in the past and you haven't cleared it, it's going to be more problematic for you in your pregnancy. So being able to have techniques that are going to support you to deal with your stress, your fear, your judgment, your anxiety, all the things that come up is really important. That's where it is on my board. Now remember. So I'm in the business of supporting you to have the best quality egg and the best quality sperm, and to give it a good 3 months of working with me, which is what my program is about, to allow for the fact that at the end of those 3 months, we're not looking to get pregnant in that time, but at the end of those 3 months, you and your partner are in an optimal state to know that every month since then that point you're going to be releasing the most healthy egg and producing the most healthy sperm, according to the fact that your perception of your environment is it's not threatening. Okay, now the age factor plays such a huge part in women's thoughts that time's running out and they must do everything they can. I totally agree, you must do everything you can, but my idea on that is very different to what someone who is trying to get you to pay for a package or to say you must do it now because the statistics are much worse after this point. Really what that is all about is the fact that people are not very well, they're not very healthy, and they need to get healthier. So if you can accept, as I said earlier, that your sexual, creative and fertile energy are one and the same, so your relationship to your sexuality, your relationship to your passion for life and your ability to conceive are linked up with each other. And womb ecology or womb toxicity is really about how you feel inside of yourself, how much you've got self-trust or you don't trust yourself. And if you feel your womb is letting you down every month because you're bleeding every month, you hate your cycle, you hate your womb, and then you want to grow a baby in it, have a think about how your baby's going to feel growing in that womb. If you feel that your womb is not a very nice thing to be working with. So we have to clear that relationship up. Judgment, how much you judge yourself, how much you judge the world, how much you judge others. If you're in a state of judgment, you're in a state of bitterness, you're in a state where your body is not thriving, it's surviving. Fear. I always talk about fear being false expectations appearing real, and fear really is the idea that you have to give your power to an external authority. It is that you are scared of all sorts of things that you're not addressing, including things like if you don't get pregnant, your partner's going to leave you. If you do get pregnant and your body changes significantly, your partner's going to go off you or is going to cheat on you. It might be that you fear your body changing and never coming back to what it once was. It may be that you fear that you will parent the way you were parented. It may be that you fear your boobs changing shape. It may be that you fear putting on the weight. It may be that you fear being sick, vomiting, or being nauseous. Like there's loads of bits in the pregnancy that we can kind of go, I'll deal with that when I'm pregnant. But we're so scared of those bits that we're not going to get pregnant because we're scared of those bits. So that's very, very important to understand, that those fears we don't address are playing a big factor. And also forgiveness plays a huge factor. So if you're in a state of judgment, you're in a state of unforgiveness. If you have had any kind of abuse, psychological, emotional, physical, sexual in your life, then it is very, very important to do the forgiveness work. That doesn't mean you forget. It means that you're no longer carrying the trauma in your body, because if you're carrying it in your body, then you know that that's something that you're potentially gifting to your baby to absorb. And so there's a part of you that knows you don't want to pass that on to your baby, so you don't get pregnant. And again, this is not stuff other people are going to talk about. It's not even stuff that, naturopaths that you're working with will talk about. You don't know how many clients I get referred to me from nutritionists, from acupuncturists that they've had this client for years, they're not getting results. Then they bring them to me and we have to do this deeper work. And I think if you do it all at the same time, it's never going to be a waste of money. It's never going to be a waste of your time, because what you're doing is you're maturing your inner family. You're maturing your relationship with your inner male, inner female, inner child. You're healing yourself so that you are the best version of you that you can be. So in the end, you're maximizing your chances of conceiving naturally. You're doubling your chances of conceiving through assisted fertility methods. And if in the end you need to accept sperm donor or egg donor because there's been such a significant trauma in the life of your parents or grandparents or yourself that has led you to a point that you really cannot reproduce yourself, then you are gifting the gift of being a healthy, holistic parent to the child that's going to come to you, even if they didn't come from your genetics, which sometimes can be a blessing. And if you may come to the point that you want to adopt, and understanding through that adoption that you are gifting a child the opportunity to heal from the trauma they inherited because you have healed that trauma yourself, rather than trying to get two wrongs to make a right. Because if you're not well and you're not healed and you're trying to help someone else to have a better experience of life, you're just going to trigger each other's unhealed parts, okay? So Ghosts in the Nursery are really about the way we were parented. It was about the environment we grew up in. It's about how safe or unsafe we feel in the world as a result of those early experiences. And, you know, to summarize all of this, if I do give you a couple of testimonials to sort of have an understanding of, one lady here is talking about the fact that she had actually gone through at age 42 and 1 month away from her 43rd birthday, she fulfilled the dream of becoming a mummy after 7 years of trying, and her daughter was her 6th IVF cycle. She talks about the fact that the emotional and the financial strain had been so much for her and her partner, and she knew she needed to do something, because effectively she'd had a pregnancy through a previous round of IVF that had meant she had to give birth at 22 weeks because her body had been attacking itself, and she was put on steroids, she had a drip, her immune system would eat away at and reject the pregnancy. She understood that there was basically an issue which was a chromosomal issue and turned out to be Edwards syndrome, and this baby was not going to be compatible to survive for long. So she had to go through a termination at 22 weeks and experience childbirth. She then got pregnant after that. So she had all of that to heal. And this is not the first time I've heard this. Other clients of mine with chromosomal issues, I've got another one I wanted to share with you here. Very similar story. This woman was 42 again, I think we're talking about, already had a child. No, at 41, she had a 2-year-old, and she was obsessing about her age, her unhealthy eggs, her repeated miscarriages, having obsessive thoughts, was giving way too much energy to the most unlikely scenarios. She was in a very dark place before she started to work with me. And in the end, she didn't just need help to get pregnant, but she needed help to keep her mindset positive the whole time that she was pregnant. And this is why the tools that I offer in the course then lead to you being able to work with me throughout the pregnancy as well, so that you keep your frequency where you want it and you deal with things as they come up. Because if you've experienced previous trauma, it's very difficult to not keep taking your mind there. And if you take your mind there, that's what you're focused on. What you focus on grows. And so you start to create the conditions of the past just because you're focused on them, rather than shifting your mindset to how this is different. And anyone who's given birth and had a traumatic first birth knows they have to be very disciplined the second time round not to believe they're going to go the same way. And there's always two voices in your head, one saying you can, one you can't. And the one that you feed is the one that is going to win in the end. So that preparation in pregnancy to feed the positive, to feed the narrative that says this time it is different, and I'm going to give myself every chance I can for this time to be different, because I'm doing things differently and I'm setting up the conditions so that they are the best they possibly can be. And you know, this leads you really to what I'm talking about. I don't worry about your age. What I look at is what you're doing physically to prepare for this baby, looking at what is going on emotionally and psychologically for you. And this is very, very important, because most people are not doing that. And it's not a one size fits all. That's why the coaching is important. That's why, although I offer my Conceive with Ease program as a digital program and have had exceptional success with it just as a digital program as well, for the more complex scenarios, you are going to need to do the coaching as well, either in a group or one-to-one, because that's how we address the really deep work. If you think about how much you spend for a round of IVF, £3,000 to £5,000, and you know, if you work with me well, as part of a group at the moment, it'll be less than the cost of a round of IVF. If you work with me one-to-one, it will be the high end of a cost of IVF and more. It's still something that, if you think about how much you spend on a car or a holiday, and you think that what you're actually getting here is potentially saving 3 lives, because you're looking at the father, the mother, and the child, and the impact here of the relationships, the impact of the long-term health, the mental, the physical, and the emotional. It's something that I wish everybody could do, and I wish it was funded by the NHS, because we would be a much healthier world if we were doing this early work and looking at the early impact. I address causes and symptoms relating to fertility issues, both conscious and subconscious, and that's what the program does, is it works with both. And work with changing your mindset and perspective on life. And this is so important, because this is what reduces stress levels. If your mindset isn't going to be challenged and you're not going to shift your perspective on life, you ain't going to shift your stress levels. And stress is such a big contributing factor to not being able to get pregnant in the first place, having a miscarriage because you're highly stressed, having a preterm baby because you're highly stressed, and having complications in your pregnancy because you're highly stressed, and having complications in your birth because you're highly stressed, which, as I said, leads to problems with bonding, feeding, sleeping, child development, and overall emotional and psychological well-being, as well as physical long-term. Also, the way that I work is about preparing you for parenthood. And this is much more than just giving birth or just getting pregnant. And I said that we are all traumatized babies with unmet needs, learning to heal and reparent ourselves. So what the course does is it provides the healing platform and also the ability to reparent yourself. And I do encourage you, if you're doing it and you're interested in joining me to do it, that you are committed to doing the work thoroughly. That's why as well, you invest in yourself financially, because read every page, look at it, go deeply into it, don't skim it. And by the way, this isn't all about reading. It's much more about the physical practices that I share with you, the emotional, psychological detoxes that we do, the lifestyle changes that I have seen are necessary, which are, it's very different. It's much more about enjoying yourself. Rather than enduring life, and looking at how you can create enjoyment, which is something that's really lacking when we're doing that tick list of doing everything right, but we feel bitter and twisted, and why aren't we getting pregnant, and we're doing everything right, and why isn't it happening, and it's this person's fault and it's that person's fault. It's not happening because you're here, love. And that's what we need to drop, and that's what my work helps you to do. It's really a 3-step process of looking at what your intention is and what's antagonizing it by aligning with that intention. And from aligning with it, it's about maintaining that alignment, which requires, the good 3 months of working together to get to that point of being able to maintain it, and then the support that's there afterwards. So that's how I get my results. That's how I get my 82% success rate. And, for the people that haven't actually conceived yet, they're the ones that have decided to take a break from that journey, because they're still processing stuff for them that's pretty deep, that has been uncovered. And maybe they've discovered that there's an issue in their partnership that they didn't realize was there, or maybe there's a family issue that needs to be addressed more deeply, or maybe they've come to understand that although they thought they dealt with their fears, they haven't really. So I do see people on different trajectories in terms of time. Some only need 3 or 4 months, and then they're pregnant within sort of 6 to 12 months of doing the Conceive with Ease course. Others need longer, in accordance with where they are on their journey. And the more that we can encourage partners to be on board as well, the better the results are, because the more antagonism you have outside of you, the more that is a representation of the antagonism inside of you and the unhealed aspects. So I want to summarize, because we've been going for a little while now, and I'm really grateful to you for your patience. I hope you found this useful, because I think that we really do obsessed with when we're ovulating and, let's have sex now because we want to get pregnant. And we're kind of missing the fact that there's a whole load of things that you do around that sets up the conditions for it to be both enjoyable and positive and healthy. And if, for example, you want to be a parent, but you are suffering from panic attacks or anxiety, it's important to address that first, to feel safe in your body, before your focus is on conceiving and going down the road of trying to get pregnant, because you're already stressed. How is it going to feel to then be going for medical examinations and tests and things that might not be very comfortable, and having to measure all sorts of things, and then that's going to make you more stressed? What are the chances of that actually increasing your chances of conceiving? Not very likely. And you've just traumatized yourself even more, so then you need another round. And then you're on the back foot because you need to detox your physical body again before you have another round, because every time you have any kind of medication, you are toxifying your body. So I hope you can start to see there's a bit of a relationship here. And if I go back to the 1001 days of a child's formative life and how it shapes us, those first year in the utero and the first 2 years outside, the brain is developing faster than it ever develops. The way that the systems of the body develop inside are amazing. And you have to have a healthy relationship with yourself to be able to have a healthy relationship with your growing baby. So your healthy relationship with you is making you feel safe inside and happy inside, and then seeing that expressed in your relationship with your partner and your home, and then your work life and everything else. You start with you, and it has repercussions on everything else. And this is the thing, the results are 360. They're not just about being able to conceive with ease or birth with ease. They're about improving your quality of life, improving your enjoyment of life, which is priceless. There's no price tag you can put on that. It's really important to get clear on why things aren't happening, because these children that are coming, they are tending to be more sensitive souls. They are requiring a different approach to parenting to often how we've been parented. And if we don't clear our programming and our conditioning, we will do what was done to us. It's just what happens. They're also requiring us to look at the school system, the nutrition, the type of medical support that we get, the way we treat childhood illnesses and infections and so forth, the way we boost the whole immune system. You wouldn't bother learning any of this stuff if you weren't having trouble in the first place yourself. So what you learn for yourself is going to be important for your children. And this is why they're guiding you. This is why I believe from the moment that you are thinking about having a baby, there's a soul around you that wants to come to you, but they need you to shift your game. They need you to raise your frequency to meet their frequency. Because on a bigger level, if you look at this planet and you're honest with yourself, is it a safe place to bring a child into? Is it somewhere that you feel has a long-term prognosis of positivity? How do you see the world going? Because we're running out of non-renewable sort resources. There's all sorts of things going on that make me think, wow, we really need to shift our game and to start to cultivate a culture of peace globally, rather than to keep justifying wars and to keep justifying power games and to keep justifying deceit and all the stuff that goes on within the sort of global politics and defense systems and what we prepare children for as they're growing in this world. That every country is different in what it's doing, every nation, every continent, but there are countries that are way ahead of the game. The Netherlands are amazing, like Sweden, Denmark, Iceland. They've got a really amazing approach to understanding the formative years and how important they are, and also the school system and how it needs to educate the whole child, not just prepare them for a mundane workforce type life. And the more that we learn that happiness and well-being is intrinsic to our health long term and to a thriving community, not just the 50 trillion cells that are our body, but the community that we're a part of, the safer we feel, the more optimistic we feel about bringing children into this world. So, you know, if you tend to read newspapers and watch the news and listen to the radio and you're involved in current affairs, and you're having trouble getting pregnant, I am not surprised. I am not surprised. There are all sorts going on, right? The world is just, it's a game in the sense that it's very subjective. We all have a different experience of it depending on what we put our focus on. And the more of us that are focused on solutions, on holistic health, on well-being, on thriving rather than just surviving, the more we're shifting the balance. So those of you who kind of fall into enjoying what I'm talking about and feeling a connection to what I'm saying and seeing how things are linked up will know that you are part of the band, if you like, of these parents to be that are bringing in high frequency souls and building a new earth paradigm here on this planet while the old world is dying. And we're doing it from within the institutions. Don't think that I expect that you're eating mung beans and living in the forest. There are people working within the pharmaceutical industry, within the banking systems, within the agricultural systems, within governments, all sorts of institutions that are awakening to the fact that things need to be different, and the challenges they're going through as they try and fulfill a desire they have, which in this instance is to grow babies, are supporting them to make the shifts within themselves that they can then support an implementation of around them. I'll give you an example. We work with nurseries. So Enjoy Yoga, the business that I have in Croydon, we take toddler yoga and baby yoga into nurseries, and we don't just provide the service of taking a yoga teacher in there. I go and I talk to the staff. I go and I explain what yoga does. I go and I talk to the people that are running the nurseries, and I ask them, you know, if they're aware of this book and that book, and, you know, how to deal with things that maybe they're not aware of because they're coming from a business model rather than actually understanding the emotional and psychological impact of children being away from their parents when they're very young. So, you know, this is part of how my wisdom and knowledge is impacting things that everybody needs. We all need nurseries. We all need schools. So your passion will take you there in different ways. And that's why if the pregnancy thing is an issue for you, it is a blessing in disguise, because it is getting you to align with the greatest version of you, the you that can be most happy and fulfilled here on this planet. And this is the best chance you get then of bringing in a child that is also going to thrive and having a happy and healthy family, which is going to support you then to procreate and procreate and procreate forevermore, helping to seed the earth that we want. So if you'd like to know more, I'll put the links in so you can register your interest for a breakthrough call with me to discuss my Conceive with Ease course and to actually look at your blocks, to look at what's really stopping you. So that breakthrough call in itself is going to make very clear the key areas for you that you need to focus on. And I do charge a nominal fee, which is £100 for the call. But if you decide you are going to go ahead with the digital product, the one-to-one or the group coaching with me, then that £100 will be deducted from the cost of the course, because you are making a commitment to yourself. And the moment you make a commitment to yourself, things start to change. I'm a game changer. I'm a game maker, sorry, not a game changer. And in that sense, it's very much about being able to kind of shift the whole being that you are, to clear the conditioning that you associate with as being you, but it's not actually you. It's just how you've been conditioned to be to survive the world that you were born into. And your body is refusing to allow you to do that to the next generation without you having looked at who you authentically are, because it changes everything. It changes how you show up in the world, what you want to do in the world, how you show up in your partnership, how you deal with the challenges in your life, and how you step forward and allow yourself to be a powerful co-creator of your reality. And you choose to thrive instead of survive, and you model that. And in so doing, you become a beacon of light, you know, a force for change, which then, just the way I'm talking, hopefully inspires you a bit, because it's like, okay, yeah, that sounds exciting. I'd like to bring a baby into that world. And then things start to shift. So I'll leave it there. Thank you so much for joining me. And if you know anybody who you feel would benefit from hearing this information, then please pass it to them. But I do want to make very clear that the age thing, the gynecological issues, the known medical reasons, the unknown medical reasons, all of these factors are just there for you to be able to look more deeply at yourself and your partnership, and to know that you can create anything that you want by having a desire for it, and then clearing up the resistance to it, and then maintaining the new frequency that you have created. And that is what I will help you to do. So namaste, lots of love, do get in touch, and please do like and share. Namaste.